Hello and welcome to another Times Radio Question and Answer. Today we're answering comments and questions from our channel members on Frontline episodes and other videos about the war in Ukraine and its impact on the world stage. I'm Philip Ingram. I'm now presenting Times Radio Frontline, but I'm a former senior British military intelligence officer and global commentator on all matters geopolitics, military, security, and anything else that people will ask me to talk about. But getting straight to the questions today, Anthony, you've come to the top of the pile, and I've got a couple from you. The first one you've said wasn't Ukraine invaded in 2022 by conscripts? And you're talking about a video explaining why Putin has got 160 new conscripts and that they won't be used in Ukraine. In reality, in 2022, no, they weren't invaded by conscripts officially. The Russian constitution does not allow conscripts to be deployed into a conflict zone, and it's only soldiers that had a contract, so contracted soldiers and contracted members of the military, that were officially deployed into Ukraine. A large number of the conscripts were have come from areas of Russia where their literacy rates are not good, and they either were bamboozled, bluffed, forced, or otherwise into signing contracts, so very quickly became contracted members of the Russian military, or offered huge financial incentives that, again, don't seem to be being paid, or those incentives are being debated whenever individuals get killed and the right compensation is not being paid to families. So officially, no, conscripts can't fight in the front line. Whenever it comes to areas like Kursk and the Ukrainian invasion in Kursk, there were a lot of Russian conscripts there because that was not considered a frontline area, and the conscripts could be used to replace regular Russian contracted military personnel so that they could go to the front line, and then the conscripts could carry out the military activities in those areas inside Russia. And that's what will still happen. And there'll still be pressure on those that are getting conscripted to take the plunge and sign a more formal contract and become regular members of the Russian military. It doesn't mean they're going to get any more training. It doesn't mean they're going to be any better. It just means that Putin can legally do more with them. And again, Anthony, you come in with a second point, and it's a very valid point. And you say, just in case anybody forgot, the US-led economic trade war with Japan led to the Pearl Harbor attack. You are 100% right. In 1940, 1941, the economic pressures that the United States were putting on Japan, in particular with natural resources, oil and diesel and aircraft fuel in particular going in, were phenomenal, and it led to war in the Pacific. That led to, or was a major contributing factor to Japan's decision-making to go for Pearl Harbor and bring them into bring Japan formally into the Second World War, bringing the United States in as well. And we're seeing similar economic pressures going on between the United States and China, with the increase of tariffs on China and then China responding. And it's very difficult to work out where this is going to stop. Once both sides have reached a peak from an economic perspective, then Xi Jinping could move on Taiwan. He's ready to do it. The optimal time for him to do that, I would suggest, is about 2027, early to mid 2027, but he's got the capability to do it today. And the key thing behind that would be wresting control of microchip manufacturing. And Taiwan is responsible for 80% of the world's microchips. The United States realizes that and is trying to onshore in the US microchip manufacturing, but they've only just started in the last few months, and it'll take at least 2 years to get the factories up and running, probably closer to 5 years. And therefore, that is the time frame where if Xi Jinping wanted to put huge economic pressure on the United States by carrying out a military option, he could do that. Of course, Xi Jinping is putting additional pressures on the United States and the global economy by restricting access and putting huge tariffs on all rare earth metals. We're back to rare earth metals again. Hence why Trump has focused on rare earth metals coming from Ukraine, potentially in Greenland and elsewhere. We've got a lot more to play out in this. So, Steve, you bring in the next point, and you say a Ukrainian soldier was interviewed saying there are only two armies protecting Western Europe, the Ukrainian and Polish armies. He might be right. The Ukrainian army is certainly protecting Western Europe, and they're fighting our fight. But it's not just Western Europe, it's the whole of the Western thinking world. So they're protecting the United States. And I don't think Donald Trump quite realizes this as well. But the Polish army, yes, it's growing. It's growing enormous, and is probably the strongest military that there is in Western Europe at the moment. You know, they've just purchased 1,000 artillery pieces from South Korea. They've just purchased 1,000 tanks, the K9s from South Korea and M1 Abrams from the United States. They're building up their military absolutely hugely, and they are a leader. But no, they're not the only military protecting Western Europe. Of course, the UK, with its strategic nuclear deterrent, declared to NATO as part of Article 5, has got that capability. And whilst we knock UK military capability, it is still one of the more powerful militaries in Europe. France has got its own independent nuclear deterrent. It's saying it will declare that to Europe and protect Europe. And of course, it has got a strong army as well. Germany on paper has, the reality it hasn't, and other major European countries are in real difficulties. But the one area that I think has got a very strong military, given the size of the country and the population, are the Baltic states. The Baltic states are almost on a pre-war footing. And then we get into the Nordics. And when it comes to strength, I wouldn't want to mess with the Swedes or the Norwegians. They're very, very good soldiers, very well equipped, and I've really enjoyed working with them on operations in the past. I'm definitely glad they're on our side. So, Steve, you come in with another one, and this is one I had to do some digging on because I'd heard of Kirill Alexandrovich Dmitriev, and you're who's the head of the Russian Direct Investment Bank, and you were asking why he was in Washington, D.C. It's interesting. He seems to be being an individual that is being used to carry out your behind-the-scenes diplomatic efforts, which I know is upsetting the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, because he sees that very much as his remit. Dmitriev is an interesting character. He was actually born in Kyiv, so he's Russian-Ukrainian, or is it Ukrainian-Russian? But he's got on well with Putin and is very close to Putin. And it's clear that Putin is using him and using his connections into the United States. I think he went to school in Harvard and understands the wider financial markets much more. And we're seeing both on the Russian side and on the American side, individuals who have got more financial backgrounds being used in diplomatic roles, which is upsetting the diplomats. It's right and proper that these sorts of negotiations go on. He's the sort of person that I would expect to be in there, so I don't see anything sinister with it. And Trump will like him because of his financial background and non-political and non-diplomatic background, even though politically he's very, very closely aligned with Putin. So this is one to watch and watch closely. And I'll also suggest that we watch the relationship between Dmitriev and Lavrov, because that is interesting. Next point comes from the Dark Elder. And what happened to General Kellogg? Does he still have a say in this, or is it down to Witkoff to advise Donald on the matter of what Russia is doing? It's interesting, the characters you brought out there. General Kellogg talks an awful lot of sense, military liaison into Ukraine. His comments have been almost polar opposite to what's coming out of some of Trump's diplomatic or his top team in when he's talking things, and it seems as if he has been sidelined. Witkoff, the former liaison to the Middle East, but he seems to be getting his fingers in the pies with Ukraine. I think that's around the fact that the initial negotiations were going on in Saudi Arabia, but he also seems to be taking up liaison into Russia. Now, how that's going to go down with Marcus Rubio, the Secretary of State, I don't know. or JD Vance, the vice president, because JD Vance seems to be doing some of Marco Rubio's work. Marco Rubio doesn't seem to be being allowed to do much. And then we've got Witkoff coming in, who is a real estate lawyer and professional from New York State and plays golf with Donald Trump. Where he's fitting in with all of this and what his qualifications are, especially when you see some of the comments that he puts out supporting Vladimir Putin, it's difficult to work out. So you ask, what is Russia going? What is Russia doing? What is going on? The reality is we don't quite know at the moment, but it's an interesting one to watch and a good question. Keep asking it because we'll keep looking at it. Dark Elder again. If Europe wants to really defend itself without wasting too much money on everyone doing a bit of everything, there's got to be some better organization. Could NATO help there? We have several cooperations like on fighter jets, but my feeling most industries are still much localized to one country. A very good point. And this is something that's been raised over many years when it comes to international cooperation and international responsibilities. If Europe was a single cohesive state, or NATO effectively was a cohesive state, you could package up and say, Poland, you're brilliant at land forces. You lead in armor. UK, you're fantastic with nuclear and naval forces. You lead in naval. France, you're brilliant on this. You lead on that. And try and share things out in a way that would be logical. However, defence is not done on a supranational basis. It's done on a purely national basis, first and foremost. And countries have to spend their defence money on what they feel is the immediate threat to them and the capabilities that they need for what they're doing. And that threat out there is very different. Countries have got different responsibilities. The UK is a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, as is France. The UK has got overseas territories it's responsible for, as is France. Both countries need power projection capability, whereas Germany doesn't. And it doesn't need power projection capability. Poland doesn't need power projection capability. It needs home defensive capability and is very much land focused rather than having to pick up a comprehensive naval, air and land package and take it somewhere to do something. So those set the different priorities. And then it's trying to get together under NATO auspices or under EU auspices to work out how things can best be done. The cooperation that you talk about on fighter jets is something that has always happened. We go back to, I'll bring the Tornado aircraft that came in that the Germans are still flying. The UK has just retired. That was a multinational corporation. And we're seeing that in the development of new aircraft. We're also seeing it in the development of land vehicles. The Boxer armored personnel carrier that was developed by a German company is now being manufactured for the UK inside the UK. So that cooperation does exist. It could get better, and I think there's a drive under this new EU and new NATO initiatives to get better, but there's always the national red card being played, and people are concerned about that. So again, very good question, very valid, and thank you for asking it. But thanks for watching this week's question and answer and posting your questions. Remember, if you want access to exclusive videos and have your questions answered, please sign up for Times Radio membership. If you want day-to-day updates, tune into Times Radio or find them at thetimes.com. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.